Guys, welcome back. It's Carlos from Scarlet and Sable. Today I'm going to be doing the beginning of what I hope is a new step-by-step. I'm going to be doing a Chaos Marine Death Guard. So we're going to start off with airbrushing. I've already applied a Zenithal highlight. I wanted to capture it on camera, but I was kind of still figuring out my camera settings. So regardless, we'll start by mixing in a little bit of water, and then I'll get some of my flow improver. It's around here somewhere. Oop, don't shake it. Never shake it. Supposedly it creates bubbles, but anyhow, we're not going to worry about it too much. And then I'm mixing in a couple drops of German camo beige, which is kind of a light brown. So now I'm going to mix it up in the cup. Very naughty, always pre-mix, do it outside of the airbrush, don't do it this way. But you know. All right. So the reason why I'm using Vallejo is I'm hoping it's going to lay down a little bit smoother. I want to have a nice, kind of like a satin to matte surface for doing the oil paint later. So right now I'm hitting kind of the undersides, just getting around. And this is real thin, so don't worry if you're not picking up a ton of color right away. It's a little bit of a gradual technique. Now, I've been thinking about something that people sometimes ask, which is, how long do these guys take? Are you worried about, or I guess they're worried about, applying these techniques on a larger scale, which is rational if you're a rational person and have responsibilities and kids and that kind of thing. So I think if one were to do this across a, like a lot of figures, that it would definitely be more efficient, and you might be able to get it done in a reasonable amount of time. So I'm going to stick with that. Anyhow, you can see he's kind of picking up a little bit of that brown color, so that's good. Get in there, get in that little cranny. And the Zenithal highlight I did using the Badger Stynylrez primer. You can use any black and white primer for that. There are some people who take it a little further, and they increase kind of the grayscale. They add in some gray. I think on that's a little bit overkill on a smaller guy. Maybe on like a tank or something you might want to do that, but on just one of these 28 mils, I don't know if that's totally necessary. Are we 32 mil yet? I don't know. I'm not sure what the official party line is, but we'll say he's 28. Okay, so we've got some dirty brown. I like it. And if you wanted to maybe use a little bit of a darker color, or you wanted to use maybe a little bit cooler of a color, like a gray or a green, you could do that too. I've just kind of chosen this brown. For whatever reason, I think I found it first. So you can see there, he's kind of got that brown here on the inside. We'll give him a little bit more on the inside of this right leg, left leg. Alrighty. Now this arm is going to be held sort of at approximately that angle. So Um, the contrast might be blowing out these highlights a little bit, so just stick with me. Uh, have faith that I am actually putting paint on the miniature. And for this one, I'm hitting it what I perceive or what I think. I kind of did a little slight dry fit beforehand. I think this will be kind of, it'll appear on the, hold on. It's going to show up on the miniature sort of like this at a bit of a downward angle. So I'm highlighting it as such. And if you can see my little friend who's buzzing around there, I have the window open. It's pretty darn hot where I'm at, and it stays hot all night. So keep the window open and don't have a screen. Anyhow, it's a pretty good story. So that guy, he's picking up some color. You can see there. Well, you can't really see very well, but it's got a little bit of the brown. I don't want to. This is mostly just for tone, so I'm not, I'm not really not looking to get him completely brown. Now the inside is almost entirely black, so we'll see how that comes out. We can always, be a bit more aggressive with our whites on the inside, but that's okay since it's going to be held against his body. You wouldn't necessarily see that anyways. When it's kind of held down like that, it's going to be in shadow, so that's what we're hoping for at least. And this is the other arm, which will be held kind of at approximately this angle on his body. So we'll hit it from underneath. There we go. So whenever you're doing water-based paint, just keep in mind that you're going to have a little bit of tip buildup. That's part of the reason why we use flow improver, to sort of minimize the tip buildup, but just check back in. And of course, if you're doing it the approved method, you would use like a cotton swab or a cotton bud on the tip here. I'm using my fingers because I'm a savage. So do as I say, not as I do. Anyhow. Ooh, got a little bit much there. Get closer to the camera. And just a little bit here on the bottom of the shoulder plate. And you can always go in and post shade. I find post shading sometimes can be a little tricky. Like sometimes the airbrush is just dialed in and singing, and then other times it's like super finicky. So, I'm not really, with the temperature and the conditions such as they are, I'm not sure I'm going to risk any post shading at this stage. So that's about good enough. Backpack. There we go. It's picking up some color. We'll hit the back here. This part is just the top of that canister is going to be visible. So that's something just to keep in mind. And we preserve the angle. So when I kind of hold it at an angle and I'm spraying up at it, when I come down with the lighter colors, I'll come down from above. So I frequently get asked how to paint white. So this is one of the ways a person could paint white. It's not the only way, and it might not. Well, I shouldn't say might. It's probably definitely not the best way, but it's kind of the way I do it. So there you have it. Okay, so we've applied our brown. Now I'm going to go for a rinse, and I'll be right back. And I'm back. So I'm not being terribly fastidious with cleaning out the airbrush. I just kind of gave it a quick rinse, and I'm going to go back in. For this color, that's really until I get to the higher areas, and it's going to be a bit of a dirty white anyway, so I want to preserve some of that, some of the filth, some of the grime, and it'll help blend those layers together. I didn't mention what PSI I'm spraying at. I'm spraying at about 10 to 15, I think. So for the people out there who are concerned, 10 to 15 PSI, about, I guess, 2 or 3 parts water, about 1 part flow improver, and 1 part paint. It's still actually looking a little thick, so it might get a little bit more water. Just a touch, not too much. This is going to be about halfway between a glaze, or yeah, like a glaze and a layer consistency. That'll have to do, I think. We'll leave it at that. Alright, so for this layer, we're going to come at more of a higher, maybe a 45. And this is all like just real basic stuff. Pretty much one of the first things you do when you start airbrushing is this is one of the ways you can get a really decent gradient without too much trouble. And I think the first time I saw it was years ago when I first started airbrushing, maybe on DACA. So that was kind of one of the places, DACA.com. That's one of the places where I started learning about the mysterious arts of airbrushing, the dark arts. One of the things that I'm kind of like always on the fence about is like, how much of the acrylic should I use? How much of the oils should I use? Because a big reason why I do the videos that I do is because some of the techniques that I use are not what I would say in wide usage, and I think there is some confusion. Not that I am like a luminary, but since I tend to, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's lots of videos about how to use acrylics and that kind of thing, so there's not much I can add to that discourse. But as far as using oil paint, on the minis, I find myself kind of being like, or wanting to show people how useful they are and kind of the cool effects that you can get with them. So that's really, it's kind of morphed into that, though I do like, obviously painting with all mediums, but I think oil paints in particular are they're like just a fun little thing you can add to your models to increase the weathering and the finish, as it were. So we still have some of the brown. You can see there it's kind of blending together a little bit. Down low it's a little bit more, from this angle it's a bit browner up top. And oh, this color is deck tan, by the way. So deck tan is kind of like a dirty white. And since I didn't clean out the airbrush super good, it's got a lot of the brown in it. So for our highest highlights, we'll probably want to do a little bit more of a thorough clean. And I was going to use ivory for my final highlight. You could do that. You could also use maybe like a white mixed with your deck tan. So there's tons of stuff you can do as far as your white. Just kind of make sure that you progress upwards towards a very bright white. And it's kind of an interesting color in the same way that black is, because it's sort of defined by the tones that you add to it. If you paint something just stark white, it looks sort of strange. It doesn't have the depth, and it's also difficult to highlight something that's already purely white. That's obviously the conundrum, if you will, of white. Same thing with black. Like, how do you shade black if it's already black? So you can't work with a pure black and you can't work with a pure white. Anyways, more on that later. Okay, so we've got some good deck tan going on. I like the look of that, and we'll come back. I was thinking ivory, but you know what? Since I really like the high flow white, I might just come back in with the white and get a nice stark highlight. Okay, so me being me, I decided to make a simpler choice for the video. I'm going to just airbrush on pure ivory, and that's going to be my top highlight. I cleaned out the airbrush relatively good. Still got some gunk in there, so ignore the gunk. Let's pretend that it's completely clean. And I'm just going to add in 2 drops of ivory. 1, 2. And this time I'm going to commit to a paint list. So put that on the list of things to do. A paint list. That'll do. So for this, we're going to come in from a very acute angle. And I'm going to spray almost from directly over the miniature. Getting a little bit closer at the airbrush, maybe 3 or 4 inches away from the top here. Just coming in over the top. Should give us a decent highlight over this. Oh, look at that. Nice big mold line right there. Didn't catch that one before. So I can see it's a little more subtle than I think other colors would be, but I like the gradient. I don't see it necessarily on the video, but I do have a gradient here. So this is going to be a decent base to work from. And so, you know, if you just wanted to do maybe 1 or 2 colors to get up to your white, that's probably okay. This is a relatively low effort gradient, I'd say. So anyhow, we can always tone down. That's one of the great things about white and weathering white in particular is you can always like just really vary it up. You can tone it down. You can add lots of interest with your washes and so forth. So it's a great color for that. I've been painting a lot of things white lately because weathering is the best. It's the reason why we do what we do, or what I do what I do. Anyhow, ivory. So here on the shoulder, we'll try to be a little bit more precise, maybe hit just the top right there, at least on the shoulder plate, and then top of the guard, the wrist guard, and maybe a touch of the elbow. That's pretty good. Let's check back in on the inside. Still pretty dark, but not too worried. Added a little bit of color. That'll darken down though. That's one of the things about acrylics is they tend to dry a lot darker. So it's always good to let them dry whenever you're spraying them, especially like colors like white, because sometimes you think that you've done something horrible and it looks way too bright, and then you come back to it and you're like, yeah, it's not so bad. Or maybe you're just lazy like me and you're like, well, I'll just move on anyways. Alright, so we got a decent white. He looks almost pure white on the video, but I'm going to give him one more spray just from the front, from the top, just for good luck, and then we'll move on to the next section. That's it. Thanks for watching, guys. We kept it to a very brief 19 and a half minutes. So I'll check back in with you. We're probably just going to block in main colors next. Thanks.